Okay, so I'm just on my way to a meeting in New York, which is why I'm wearing the black suit, even though it's 95 degrees, and why I'm in New York, even though I was having a much better time in England. But I'm on my way to a meeting with a major cable channel to try and pitch and sell them an idea or a bunch of ideas. And you never know with these things, but this is how you make a living and this is what you got to do. So I thought I would take a minute before I went to share an absolutely great and true story with you about another TV series that I pitched and kind of sold and it kind of worked out. But it's a good insight into what cable is looking for. A lot of times people who take the boot camps, and there are 2 coming up in the fall, or who sign up for the VJ.com, which I needless to say urge you to do, ask me and say, I have this great idea for a TV series and how do I pitch it and stuff like that. And of course, you know, there are, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but this story should give you some insight into what works for cable and what they will actually pay for, and they pay a lot. Anyway, as you probably know, I had formed this company called Video News International, which was an amalgamation of 100 video journalists that I equipped and trained around the world. It's kind of like an early CNN in the early 1990s, and the New York Times bought 51% of it, and that became New York Times Television. And the idea was originally that we would produce, New York Times TV, but the New York Times, Joe Lelyveld, who ran the paper, this is another story I'll tell you some other time, was not interested in television. He very proudly said to me, I don't own a television set, I don't watch television, I'm not interested in television, and a lot of other things. So we were kind of stuck, and by happenstance, we created this very successful series called Trauma Life in the ER, which still airs. In fact, I saw it on the air in Britain, of all places, at about 2 in the morning on channel 521, but the thing's 30 years old. Anyway, it was a very successful series for the Learning Channel, which was our client, and that went so well that after that it spun off Paramedics and Maternity Ward, and pretty soon we were producing almost every show on TLC, and TLC had shot to the top of the market and all that kind of stuff. So finally the New York Times turned around and they said, well, we'd like to have a TV show also. So I went, great, fine, because we had this very good relationship now with TLC, and, John Ford, who ran it, loved us, and we loved him, and the New York Times had nothing to do with it. So the New York Times came up with some really crossword puzzles. That was one of their ideas for a show. Really no understanding of television whatsoever, which I think they have the problem to this day. Anyway, finally after much, and they said we have to get something, and we went to Ford and we go, for crying out loud, just give them something, just to make them happy, because they own the majority of the business. So, finally we all agreed we would do Science Times, the section of the New York Times that science comes out on Tuesdays or Thursdays, or maybe that's Style, I don't really remember. You have to ask Lisa. Anyway, so we were going to take this section of the paper, Science Times, and turn it into a TV series. It seems like a reasonable thing, but here's the thing about cable. If it doesn't rate, nobody's going to put it on the air, no matter how much they like you. So, and of course the paper with Lelyveld was still very nervous about doing television, that we would corrupt the integrity of the paper and all that kind of stuff. So after much agonizing, we decided to have this giant meeting in Bethesda. I think that's where TLC still was, before they went to Silver Spring. Anyway, so we have this giant meeting, and we have people from the New York Times and their lawyers, and we went there, and people from the Learning Channel went there, and it was at a giant meeting, and it was all very uncomfortable, because it's one of those things like where, you're getting married to somebody, and then the in-laws meet for the very first time. That's what the room was like. So the room was just phenomenally tense, and everybody was very uncomfortable. Everybody wanted to please everybody, but everybody had their own sort of agenda. So when we started the meeting, I forgot who was running the meeting, suggested, well, why don't we go around the room and we can introduce ourselves and say what we're looking for. And so we started with Nicholas Wade. And Nicholas is a very nice erudite from the New York Times. He was the managing editor, or the editor of the Science Times section. And British, and very erudite, and very well educated, and very well spoken, a balding guy with glasses. And they said, well, Nick, why don't you explain what you see as Science Times, since we were going to put it on television. He says, well, we produce the Science Times section mostly for the science professional, but we're also interested in the amateur, the advanced amateur, who has some interest in scientific questions. And we try to write basically for the professional, but with an interest for amateurs. We have no interest in children. We go, thank you very much, Nick. That was great. And then we went to John Ford, and we said, John, what's your vision of Science Times? And John Ford said, he was running TLC, he says, we want television hot, H-O-T-T, hot, hot, hot. And you could see that there was shock in the room. And Nick Wade was a very nice guy, but was from the world of New York Times print, turned green and yellow and various different colors. And I said, why don't we take a break? And we went out in the hall, and I took Nick Wade out, and I said to Nick, are you okay? And he said, yes. And I said, well, can we go ahead? He goes, yes. He says, just one thing. I said, what's that? He says, for people who call themselves the Learning Channel, they don't seem to be particularly interested in learning anything. I said, no, Nick, man, they just want ratings. That's all they're interested in. And that is all they're interested in. They're not really interested in learning anything, as anyone who looks at TLC now can tell you, because you want to learn about the life of 600-pound people. I suppose that's learning something. Anyway, John Ford was right. Bang, 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 hot, 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 hot. Ratings, that's all I wanted. One of his great quotes that I remember is, cable television is like video flypaper. You just want to catch people. So that's what we try to do. And so today when I go over to, actually I think I'm seeing the Food Channel today, I want television that's hot, 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 H-O-T-T, hot, hot, hot. And they're not really interested in learning anything, but not because the cable channel is bad, it's because the American audience doesn't really want to learn anything. They just want to be entertained. So if you have an idea for a cable show, and we are always happy to co-produce and to listen and to help you or just give advice, and you know, my whole idea is to empower people and help you to make money and get your stuff on the air. We're very happy to help you shape the thing and get it on the air, but it has to be H-O-T-T, hot, hot, hot. Thank you, John Ford. And of course, Science Times, I think around one season or two, it had 0 ratings because it was about learning things, which television doesn't really want to do. Anyway, that's today's message. And now that I'm in New York, I'll probably come to you live again in the very near future. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.